What on earth was going on? A brief 10-second video filmed by an American businessman at Toronto Pearson International Airport had gone viral overnight, rocketing to 12 million views globally. But what stunned the man who filmed it wasn't the content of the video itself, but the universal chorus of comments from around the world. You would never see this in the United States. Why was this something only Canada seemed to get right? What exactly did he capture in that fleeting moment, and why did it resonate so deeply with millions? Let's delve into the story. Mark Wilson, a 45-year-old senior partner at a top-tier consulting firm headquartered in Los Angeles, commanded an annual income exceeding 5 million Canadian dollars. For a man who lived his life hopping between continents, airports were his second office. In his unwavering opinion, the best airport in the world was, without question, Los Angeles International Airport, LAX. A colossal hub of global aviation serving over 87 million passengers a year, LAX was, to Mark, a testament to America's grand infrastructure and a source of immense national pride. Canada's airports, they're probably quaint, like something you'd find in a smaller European country, I guess he had once remarked to a colleague. America's GDP was roughly 15 times that of Canada's. The numbers, he believed, spoke for themselves. This conviction wasn't just based on statistics, but was deeply rooted in a humiliating experience he'd endured the previous year at an airport in Southeast Asia. His luggage had been carelessly thrown about by staff, causing important documents to spill out. When he complained, he was met with an indifferent shrug. That's just how it is in Asia, he was told. The incident cemented his prejudice. As his flight began its descent towards Toronto Pearson International Airport YYZ, a smug smile played on Mark's lips. This business trip, he thought, is my chance to show these Canadians what real American efficiency looks like. He was spearheading a major merger and acquisition project with a Canadian tech firm. His mission was to introduce the aggressive, results-driven American business model to their operations. A perfect job, he mused. Canadians are polite to a fault, focusing on the small, trivial details while losing sight of what truly matters. In the World Economic Forum's competitiveness rankings, the United States stood proudly near the top, while Canada, though respectable, was several places behind. To Mark, this was objective proof. Even as a flight attendant kindly explained some nuances of Canadian culture, his expression remained cold. Humility and politeness don't win in the boardroom, he thought. Results are all that matter. A surge of confidence swelled in his chest as the plane neared the runway. He pictured the Canadian executives soon to be bowing to the sheer force of American corporate power. He had no idea that the reality awaiting him on the ground was about to shatter his entire worldview. The moment the aircraft touched down at Toronto Pearson, Mark's life-altering education was about to begin. Stepping into the terminal, Mark immediately sensed something unusual. The floors were exceptionally clean, gleaming under the bright lights. Must have just been polished, he reasoned. Walking towards immigration, he instinctively glanced at his watch. At this time of day, LAX would be a chaotic sea of long queues. Yet the lines at Pearson's passport control were moving with surprising smoothness. Fewer passengers, I suppose, Mark concluded, trying to fit his observations into his preconceived notions. But it was at the baggage claim carousel where the first real crack appeared in his hardened convictions. As the ground crew began unloading the luggage, they didn't just place it on the belt. They carefully, deliberately arranged each suitcase. "What in the world are they doing?" he muttered. This was a sight utterly foreign to him. In the U.S. Bags were loaded onto the carousel, with little concern for their orientation or position. But here the Pearson staff were placing every single piece of luggage with the handle facing outwards, making it easier for travelers to grab their bags. How inefficient. A total waste of time, Mark scowled. In his value system, this was incomprehensible. The foundation of American business was time efficiency. Every second directly impacted the bottom line. A greater bewilderment was yet to come. On his way to the exit, Mark found himself disoriented. Pearson's signage was in multiple languages, but for someone accustomed to the big, bold, and simplistic signs of American airports, the more detailed Canadian design felt confusing. "Excuse me, where can I find the taxi stand?" he asked a nearby airport employee, in English. The employee, though not perfectly fluent, did her best to explain, but what she did next truly surprised Mark. Seemingly concerned that her words weren't clear enough, she started to personally lead him towards the taxi queue. "Oh, you don't have to do that. It's really not necessary," Mark said, feeling a pang of awkwardness. At an American airport, an employee would never personally escort an individual passenger. Their job was to perform their assigned tasks. Any extra service was a paid option. But the Pearson employee simply smiled and replied, "It's my pleasure. Making sure our guests feel secure is part of our job." An indescribable feeling began to stir within Mark. This employee stood to gain nothing from this. Why would she go to such lengths for him? It was an act that American rationalism could not compute. When they reached the taxi stand, the employee gave a polite nod and turned to leave. Mark stood there momentarily, stunned, a strange mixture of confusion and warmth filling his chest. He quickly shook it off. "This is no time to get sentimental," he told himself. In business, efficiency is truth. In the taxi, he tried to validate his impressions by striking up a conversation with the driver. "Are the staff at this airport always so helpful?" The driver answered as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. "Of course. The customer comes first. That's just common sense, isn't it?" Mark's confusion only deepened. After checking into his hotel, Mark was reviewing his documents for the next day's negotiation when he realized a critical presentation file was missing. He remembered placing it in his checked luggage. A dreadful feeling washed over him. He frantically searched through his suitcases, but it was nowhere to be found. Tomorrow's negotiation was crucial for his career. If this deal succeeded, a promotion to President of Asia-Pacific Operations was within his grasp. Without this key document, the negotiation was likely doomed. "Damn it, it's just like every other country's airport," he seethed, shaking with anger. The nightmare he'd experienced in Asia resurfaced. Lost luggage, unaccountable staff, and ultimately you were on your own. He was convinced all non-American airports were fundamentally the same. The next morning, he called Pearson's lost and found department. "I'm looking for an important document folder. I arrived last night." The agent on the other end listened patiently and politely to his situation before responding. "Okay, sir, I'll look into this for you right away. Please hold for a moment." Mark held little hope. In the USA, baggage trace could take ages. It would surely take even longer in Canada. But unexpectedly, the phone rang back in under 20 minutes. "Sir, we've found your folder," the agent's voice conveyed a sense of relief. Really, Mark couldn't hide his astonishment. "Yes. It was found under a seat during last night's cleaning. We've been holding it securely for you." When Mark rushed to the airport, a staff member was waiting with his folder perfectly preserved. Not a single page was missing. "Thank you so much. You've been a tremendous help." But the employee's next words left Mark speechless. "Actually, sir, we were just about to arrange for a courier to deliver it to your hotel. We're very sorry to have made you come all this way." Mark was utterly bewildered. He had been the one to carelessly lose his documents, yet the airport staff was apologizing to him. They were even planning to personally deliver it. This was a level of service that would be absolutely unthinkable in the United States. "Why would you do all this for me?" Mark couldn't help but ask. The employee looked slightly bashful as he replied, "Well, we were in possession of a guest's important belongings. It's our responsibility to return them to you safely. Besides, how could we just ignore a guest who is clearly in distress?" That indescribable feeling surged through Mark once again. This employee had no obligation to go this far. Why was he so dedicated? There was no bonus or reward for him. Why would he willingly sacrifice his own time for a stranger? "We're just really glad we could help," the employee said, his smile radiating a genuine sense of satisfaction, as if he were happy about a personal accomplishment. In the taxi on the way to his meeting, Mark was lost in thought. Everything he had experienced in the last 24 hours defied the logic of his value system. These actions, which ran counter to efficiency and rationalism, had nonetheless left a profound positive impression on him. "Have I been overlooking something important?" he wondered. But he quickly pushed the thought aside. Don't get emotional. In the business world, results are everything, Mark told himself, steeling his resolve. He was determined to prove the superiority of the American efficiency-first business model in the upcoming negotiation. The negotiation went even more smoothly than anticipated. Mark's presentation was flawless, and the Canadian company's executives listened intently. "By implementing our system, you can reduce costs by 30% and cut your workforce in half." The Canadian team seemed intrigued by the efficiency promised by the numbers. But at the end of the talks, an unexpected question arose. So, how will the employment issue be handled? Have you considered the staff who will be laid off? Mark scoffed internally. In business, eliminating inefficient elements is standard practice. This is what will lead the company to growth. But the faces of the Canadian executives darkened. We consider our employees to be like a family. We can't just abandon them. Mark couldn't comprehend it. Bringing sentiment into business was irrational. Emotional decisions don't grow a company. To win in the global arena, efficiency is essential. The negotiation was put on hold. The Canadian side said they would reconsider, but Mark knew it was a rejection. On the way back to the hotel, he couldn't hide his frustration. These Canadians are impossible to understand. They're not keeping up with global standards. But an event the next day confused him even more. In the hotel lobby, he ran into a young employee from the Canadian company he had just negotiated with. "Mr. Wilson," the employee said, giving a respectful nod. "Thank you for your time yesterday." Mark was on high alert, expecting a sarcastic comment after the rejection. But what happened next was the complete opposite. "Actually, I'd like to help you understand our culture better, Mr. Wilson. If you have some free time, would you be interested in a tour of our company?" Mark was puzzled. They had rejected his proposal, so why invite him for a tour? There had to be a catch. "I'm not particularly interested," Mark replied coolly. But the young employee persisted. "What you said about efficiency is important, Mr. Wilson, but we have our own kind of efficiency. If you could see it with your own eyes, I believe you might find something new." In the end, Mark's curiosity got the better of him, and he agreed. But in his mind, a strong conviction remained. "I'll just be seeing more of Canada's inefficient management style." This might be a good opportunity to reaffirm America's superiority. On the day of the tour, Mark was astonished. The atmosphere at the Canadian company was completely different from that in the US. The relationships between employees were like those of a family. In Mark's eyes, this was the picture of inefficiency. How can a competitive edge be born from such a relaxed environment? He inwardly mocked. During the factory tour, he saw employees meticulously maintaining their own machines. In the U.S., such work would be outsourced to specialized companies, a complete lack of cost consciousness, Mark firmly believed. He was even more surprised in the employee cafeteria during the lunch break. Executives sat and ate at the same tables as general staff. This was unheard of in the hierarchical corporate culture of the US. How can you maintain organizational discipline without a clear class divide? But that evening, an incident occurred that would shake Mark's value system to its core. A small accident happened in the factory, and an employee suffered a minor injury. The way the Canadian company handled it left Mark speechless. The moment the accident happened, the mood in the factory shifted. But there was no chaos as Mark had expected. Instead, there was a surprisingly calm and orderly response. The employees closest to the injured worker immediately administered first aid, while another called for an ambulance. Someone else contacted the worker's family. They're probably just following a standard operating procedure, Mark initially thought. American companies had emergency protocols too. But what happened next was beyond his imagination. When the plant manager arrived on the scene, the first thing he did was apologize to the injured worker. "I'm so sorry. This happened because of my inadequate management." In the US, the first step would be to determine liability and assess legal risks. Such an emotional apology would be considered a dangerously incriminating act. But the plant manager's apology was clearly heartfelt. What was even more surprising was what followed. After the injured worker was taken to the hospital, the plant manager gathered all the employees. "This accident is a result of a problem with our safety management. Starting tomorrow, we will review all our work processes. We absolutely cannot let this happen again." Mark was thoroughly confused. The accident was caused by the injured worker's own carelessness. Why did the plant manager need to take responsibility in the US? This would have been classified as an individual's fault, but he was even more baffled by the reaction of the other employees. No one blamed the manager. Instead, a chorus of voices said, "We should have been more careful ourselves." The entire organization was sharing the responsibility. "This is so inefficient," Mark grumbled internally. But the scene he witnessed the next day delivered the final decisive blow to his value system. When he returned to the factory, the employee who had been injured the day before was back at work, his arm still bandaged. "Why aren't you resting? Don't you have the right to take paid sick leave?" Mark asked. The employee looked conflicted. "I've already caused everyone enough trouble. "How could I rest? It's just a minor injury. I can still do paperwork." The response left Mark speechless. In the U.S., taking the maximum possible sick leave was normal. It was a worker's right, but this employee chose responsibility over rights. Even more astonishing was the behavior of the other staff. They naturally pitched in to cover the injured worker's tasks. No one complained. Instead, they expressed concern, asking, "Are you sure you're okay? Don't push yourself." What on earth was going on? Mark was in a state of complete confusion. Prioritizing the group's interest over the individual's, valuing responsibility over rights, this was in direct contradiction to every business theory he had ever learned. During the lunch break, he asked the young employee who was guiding him, "Why is everyone so dedicated to the company? Wouldn't it be okay to think more about themselves?" The young employee thought for a moment and replied, "The company supports our lives, so it's only natural that we support the company. We help each other out. Ultimately, that makes everyone happier." Mark still couldn't fully grasp it. But when he saw the company's performance data, he was even more perplexed. Compared to efficiency-driven American companies, their productivity was just as high. In contrast, their employee retention rate was astonishingly good, and the quality of their products was noticeably superior. It must be a coincidence, Mark told himself. They're just having a good quarter. But deep down, another feeling was beginning to sprout. Could it be that the efficiency I believe in is only superficial? Perhaps true efficiency exists on a much deeper level. The question quietly took root in his mind. On the day of his departure, Mark arrived at Toronto Pearson International Airport with a complex mix of emotions. His week in Canada had profoundly shaken his preconceived notions, yet he couldn't fully accept it. Ultimately, the American way of business is the global standard, he told himself. Canada is just an exception. As he approached the check-in counter, an unexpected problem occurred. A system failure meant his reservation couldn't be confirmed. "We are so sorry for the inconvenience this has caused. The system is currently being restored," the counter staff said with a very polite bow. Mark began to feel impatient. These kinds of problems were common in the U.S., but usually you just get a curt, "It's a system issue," and that would be the end of it. But the handling of the situation at Pearson was completely different. "We offer our deepest apologies for the inconvenience. We will have a manager come speak with you immediately." A few minutes later, a manager appeared, and her actions left Mark dumbfounded. She was a middle-aged woman in a crisp uniform. "My name is Isabelle Tremblay. On behalf of the airline, I want to sincerely apologize for the inconvenience this system issue has caused you," Miss Tremblay said, offering a respectful bow. In the USS, a manager would never come out to apologize personally for such an issue. But the subsequent handling of the situation was even more startling. "We will be upgrading you to first class, and we would like to offer you a voucher for your next flight to express our sincere apology." Her words sent a shockwave through Mark. In the American corporate world, organizational responsibilities were clearly delineated. It was a fundamental principle not to interfere in matters outside one's own jurisdiction. But Miss Tremblay had transcended organizational boundaries, prioritizing the customer's satisfaction above all else. While waiting in the VIP lounge, Mark reflected on the events of the past week. The airport staff who kindly guided him, the employee who went out of his way to return his lost property, the company that treated its employees like family, the factory where everyone shared responsibility for an accident, and now this manager who disregarded organizational lines for the sake of a customer. The common thread in all these events was a heart that cared for others. Even though it seemed to contradict efficiency and rationalism, it ultimately created the best results. Perhaps this is Canada's true strength. As boarding time approached, Mark instinctively took out his smartphone. He wanted to film the service Miss Tremblay had just provided, but his reason for filming was completely different from his initial intentions. At first, he might have wanted to mock what he saw as excessive Canadian service, but now he wanted to introduce this exceptional service to the world. When he asked for Miss Tremblay's permission to film, she replied shyly, "I'm only doing my job, but if it helps, please go ahead." The video he took was only 10 seconds long. It showed Miss Tremblay carefully handling a piece of luggage and then smiling as she gave a customer a respectful nod. It was a seemingly ordinary scene, but to Mark it was clear that this mundane image captured the true power of Canada. As he boarded the plane, he whispered to himself, "I was so wrong. I overlooked the most important thing." He decided he had to share this video with the world. Back in Los Angeles, Mark immediately posted the video to his social media with the caption, "Is this for real?" A 10-second video from Toronto Pearson Airport. In the comments, he wrote his true feelings, "I completely misunderstood Canada. The employee in this video isn't doing anything special. She is simply acting from a genuine desire to care for the customer. But I've realized that this is Canada's true strength." The video spread like wildfire. Within a day, it had surpassed 1 million views. Within a week, it hit 12 million. The comments from around the world far exceeded Mark's expectations. "You would never see this at an American airport. This must be that famous Canadian service. It's not just superficial. You can feel the genuine care." Why is it that only Canada can achieve this? Particularly impactful were the comments from airport workers in other countries. "We want to be like them. We've all forgotten how to care for the customer. I'm changing my attitude starting tomorrow." Mark was deeply moved. His experience was influencing people all over the world. But the biggest change occurred within Mark himself. His style of business negotiation transformed dramatically. He no longer pursued efficiency at all costs. He began to think from the other party's perspective. Reducing costs is important, but the employment of all staff is equally important. How about we work together to find a solution that achieves both? This approach was initially met with skepticism from his colleagues. What on earth happened to Mark in Canada? This isn't like him. But the results were astounding. Proposals that considered the other party's position were increasingly accepted by companies. He built long-term relationships based on trust, and his rate of repeat business soared. 6 months later, Mark was promoted to President of Asia-Pacific Operations. But what he was proudest of was something else. His video had become a catalyst for service improvement at airports around the globe. This approach, which came to be known as the Canadian Standard, significantly increased user satisfaction. Messages of gratitude poured in from all over the world. "Your video showed me the greatness of Canada. I want to visit. You taught me what true care is." Now Mark visits Canada several times a year. Beyond business, there is much he wants to learn from the country. A few days ago, he ran into Miss Tremblay again at Toronto Pearson. "Mr. Wilson, welcome back," she said, remembering him. "That video of yours became quite famous around the world, you know." "I was only doing something very ordinary. I'm quite embarrassed." Mark replied with a heartfelt smile. "Miss Tremblay, it's precisely what you consider ordinary that has changed the world. The caring heart of the Canadian people is bringing hope to people everywhere, and I want to be a part of that." Walking through the terminal at Toronto Pearson, Mark's heart was full of gratitude. He was thankful for the good fortune of encountering Canada and ashamed of his own arrogance just a year before. Efficiency is important, he now knew, but there is something more vital. It is a heart that cares for others that brings true success. This was the most important lesson Mark learned from Canada. And now, he is working to spread that lesson to the rest of the world. The story that began with a simple 10-second video continues to resonate globally, a testament to the quiet power of genuine human connection.